question?
We want to start off by asking you guys to dream big. You had unlimited resources. What one thing would you tackle in the prosecutor's office?
If I had unlimited resources, I'm afraid I would probably put my money towards proactive community efforts that would essentially address some of the critical community issues, such as jobs, education, people's feelings of hopelessness. I believe that the best formula for decreasing crime, quite frankly, is to be able to give children more opportunities. I believe I would also invest more directly to the point of the prosecutor's office in diverting offenders wherever possible, either to minimum security facilities because they're so far much more cost effective, or to absolute diversionary programs that would afford people the opportunity to escape the criminal justice system without a permanent, lasting criminal record.
Mr. Curtis?
Unlimited funds? If unlimited funds, the first thing I'm going to do is bring a drug court to Mesquite County. They are proven in the state of Michigan to be 90% successful that anybody who completes the program doesn't reoffend in the first year. Those are for non-violent offenders, drug users, that addresses the underlying problem. And that's what needs to be done. If we continue to arrest, incarcerate, repeat, then nothing's going to change. We have to address the reasons that they're committing those crimes and address their drug abuse problems. Unlimited funding, there's a lot I could do with unlimited funding, but that would be the first thing is we need to move this community forward and get away from just locking people up and not providing them what they need.
Mr. Wilson?
Well, the first thing I would do is move a lot quicker to a paperless office. For us as prosecutors, we handle hundreds and hundreds of files, and the paper is unbelievable. So I'd move to a paperless office. But the real key to what I would do with unlimited funds would invest in our kids. I really believe that if we invest in our children and we give them the opportunities that they need, that they will end up walking across the stage at graduation and not stand next to an assistant prosecutor in the courtroom. And certainly by giving our kids these opportunities, but more importantly, also giving the family structure the help and the resources that they need. Because quite honestly, it's the family structure. If we give them that positive aspect and that support, that whole trickle effect will happen, where the kids will feel happy and safe at home, and they'll also be certainly happy and safe at the school and want to stay in school. And that's the key: education and safer families.
I'm sorry, this question would go to Mark Curtis.
Prosecutors have indicated that there is a perception that the prosecutor's office has a kind of a closed door policy. What would you do as prosecutor to reach out to the community?
Well, when I first came to Muskegon, in Muskegon Heights, Muskegon, I became a community prosecutor in that area, taking over for Mr. Wilson after he moved on. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot that if you want to get to know your community, you have to be in your community. When I was moved to Muskegon Heights as a community prosecutor, I got to know that area very well, to one point where my wife started calling it my second home, because I was spending so much time there working with law enforcement. Part of my plan is, and what I laid out since the very beginning of this campaign is that I believe that there need to be prosecutors in the community. Because to not know your community is to not know who you're representing. It's easy to sit up there and read the police report, read the names, and everything seems to be horrible. I remember when I first moved here, the first 6 months, I asked where the decent people were, because all I see is police reports. But once I got into the community, and I started to interact and see that there was more to it than what you just see in the office, I became more invested. The prosecutors need to be there. They will be assigned to a jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction will have their own.
It's not what I would do, but it's what I have done. I've been at the neighborhood association meetings for the past several years. sitting down, listening to the concerns of the neighbors as they talk about the blight, the vehicles and the blight in the neighborhoods. I've done that. I belong to community service organizations like the Greater Muskegon KCs, the Muskegon Rotary Club, the Fraternal Order of Police, the Knights of Columbus, groups that are actually out in the community. In fact, it was commented not too long ago, somebody said, hey, great, a face for the prosecutor's office. Thank you very much for joining our club. It's those things. It's being active, going to the dinners for the United Way, going to the business breakfast that the Chamber of Commerce puts on, being that face of the prosecutor's office. It's those things that I've done already, building those relationships. So I don't have to start from ground zero. I'm already doing it. So I agree with you. The community deserves a public servant that's out there and a face for the prosecutor's office, and I've already done that.
I, quite frankly, as noted by Mr. Hilson, not having practiced recently in the area of criminal law extensively, I'm not in a position really to critique Mr. Tagg's openness or lack of openness. I do recall, however, at the risk of being glib, that when I left the prosecutor's office in 1985, we had no locks on the doors. I probably would take the locks off the doors and allow the public to essentially come in a little more freely than has been the case for the last couple of decades. I do appreciate the comments made by Mr. Hilson with regard to the need to be proactively involved with the community. I do believe, however, that a stalwart of community corrections, Mary Payne, is here at the front row, that the county prosecutor's office has got to be much more involved in community corrections advisory matters. Looking with community representatives for solutions, diversion, the things alluded to by Mr. Curtis moments ago. Thank you.
Is any response anyone needs to make?
Well, I would.
Okay.
The issue I have is that we can go to a bunch of meetings, we can go and sit and listen to people, but until we actually start interacting with the citizens of this community, that community will believe that there's an ivory tower downtown. That needs to be taken away. And getting to know the individual members of your community helps you a whole lot better than going to a public breakfast.
Anyone else?
Well, I'll just respond to that. Apparently, I guess we don't want, you're offending the neighborhood association because they are members of the community. You're offending the business community because they are members of the community. These are the folks that live and breathe in this community, that work in this community, that live and send their kids to school in this community. So, quite honestly, doing those things is a step in the right direction.
The next question goes to Mr. Wilson.
What role can a prosecutor play when there is an uptick in a certain type of crime, for instance, an increase in neighborhood shootings or dramatic growth in the use of illegal drugs such as heroin?
Well, I think the prosecutor's office can work in conjunction, in cooperation with local law enforcement. I think when you have those strong established relationships with local law enforcement, that makes dealing with those hot topic issues a lot easier. Because one, you're out there working hand in hand, for instance, if there are hot spots or there are areas in the community that have a stronger presence of violence. And so when you're working together in a cooperative effort, we have the police investigating, and then you have the prosecutor's office sending the right message in the courtroom, that those types of acts won't be tolerated. So working hand in hand with law enforcement is a huge issue to essentially get those issues solved.
Mr. Coleman?
Well, certainly neighborhood watch approaches, as well as, the old approach, I don't know to what extent is now funded, of having basically their officers in the school is very helpful. I think, however, that the prosecutor's office, and the prosecutor in particular, as the chief law enforcement official in the county, has a tremendous ability to speak out in many different ways along the lines Mr. Olson has alluded to. I think that basically you can harness, you can mobilize, you can lead. And that's what I would hope to do if elected prosecutor. It's not just the hot spots that need to be addressed. It's basically you've got to develop approaches that can be used to be proactive throughout the community. If the problem is that there's a lack of joblessness, if there's joblessness, if there's a lack of educational opportunity, then those things should be spoken out to by the prosecutor.
Mr. Curtis?
Listen, that's the number one thing. Law enforcement knows their neighborhoods. They know what's going on. If there's an uptick of some criminal activity or an uptick of drugs, you listen to what your law enforcement officers are telling you what help that they need. You work with them to find out what help that they need. Several times when I was in the office, I would get a call from the neighborhood response team in Muskegon PD or from some other law enforcement agency that would say, we're having a problem in this area. Well, how do we address it? Okay, well, this is what we want to do. We want to put patrols in there. We want to put no plea bargaining policy in that area. We want to make sure that that gets taken care of until that situation is addressed. If you listen to law enforcement and we work with them, not telling them what they should do, but work with them and they listen to what we have to say and what they can do, it's an effective tool. We can curb those hot spots and curb those areas. But we can't do it. The prosecutor just can't walk in and say, this is how we're going to do it. Because if you do that, then you're not addressing the issue or working with everyone in order to get it accomplished.
Any responses? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Follow-up question?
Yeah, on that, a follow-up to that same question is, how would you specifically partner with law enforcement agencies to address these issues?
Is it back to me or is it back to
Yeah,
us?
we'll start with you.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. Well, quite easily. What I've learned over the last 12 years of being an assistant prosecutor in this county is that every police jurisdiction really has this idea of cooperation. I've had the fortunate experience of working on task force. We had a series of armed robbers in Muskegon Heights a few years ago, and there was a cooperative effort between Muskegon Heights, the city of Muskegon, Norton Shores, and the prosecutor's office on a task force working together night and day to solve those armed robberies. Similar to the business breaking and entries that happened in this county a few years ago that were plaguing Muskegon Township. Again, it became a cooperative effort between the various jurisdictions. And it's that spirit that's going to get accomplished what we want to accomplish in this community. It's that spirit and it's that experience that I've had for my career that it's all about solving the crime and working together. And that's exactly how it gets done.
Mr. Coleman?
And if I might, Eric, to be a little more specific in regard to the hotspot issue, Mr. Wilson kind of stimulated my recall. I know years ago, some 30 years ago, I was involved in the establishment of the West Michigan Drug Enforcement Team. We met. It's still in place. It's still flourishing. It's doing well. That essentially represented involvement between state police, between, I believe, Ottawa County departments, Kent County, and Muskegon County. But to that, I think I would have to emphasize, looking back on it some 30 years later, that there has to be probably more of an official role given to the concept of essentially neighborhood watch. So essentially you have a triangle of cooperative cops, interjurisdictional, neighborhood watch, and of course the prosecutor trying to lead in addressing the focused issues.
Mr. Curtis?
Being very specific, Mr. Hilson's correct. I worked on that same armed robbery task force with him, and it's amazing when you make the call, how people will come to help. But you have to be able to be ready when they make that call. If you want to address a problem that is happening right then and there, these community prosecutors that will be out there will be working with those police departments. We're not going to have to rally, go find the prosecutor, get somebody assigned to it and do it. That prosecutor is already going to be familiar with what's happening and see what's coming on, be familiar with those officers, be familiar with that area. That prosecutor will be the person who's leading that ability. And the cooperation I've seen, the investigation I've worked on, anytime I've picked up the phone and asked another department for assistance, they have come and helped. And I expect that to continue.
Okay. And it's interesting, because this is a reader-submitted question. Given that there are more people incarcerated in the United States than in any other country, we're a world leader in that particular race, what specifically will you do to decrease the number of new inmates sent to jail and prison?
My way of background and pedigree, although I only spent 8 years in the prosecutor's office, I spent 20 years as legal counsel for the Community Corrections Advisory Board. In that capacity, I customarily had occasion to go to Lansing. I had occasion to deal with funding authorities down there with regard to what was then termed smart justice. Essentially, it's an idea whereby we recognize that we can no longer afford to spend $35,000 per inmate. What we basically have to do is look for all sorts of alternatives, step downs. Mr. Curtis has alluded to some of them, diversionary programs. We have to divert. Where we cannot divert, we have to utilize essentially house arrest, tethers. I know there's some increase in tethers over the year, things of that nature. All sorts of funding options for cheaper, better, diversionary programs has to be pursued feverishly. Has to be done. We cannot afford to go on the way we are locking up everybody.
We come back to the specialty courts, the drug court, the veterans court, the sobriety court. The sobriety court's been very effective here in Muskegon County. Drug courts around Michigan have been very effective, but yet here in Muskegon County we don't have one. It's easier to say we're tough on crime and we should lock everybody up and try to address the issue of what the underlying problem is. When we start doing that, then we'll start to see a change. Then the jail population will start to go down. Then the prison population will go down. That doesn't mean we're being soft on crime. It means we're trying to prevent it before it happens. Violent and career criminals have a place that they need to be, and it's not in our community. And if we're putting people in there that deserve a chance of rehabilitation, that deserve a chance of not just being thrown in, incarcerated, serving your time back out on the street, and then being rearrested, then we have to give those people that chance. If they're willing to stand up and ask for help, then we should give them that help. But if you're a violent career criminal or you're doing something in this community that endangers it, then we'll make sure there's space for you.
Well, the goal is to keep our community safe, bottom line, keep our community safe. And to accomplish that, there are a lot of ways to accomplish that. And certainly programs like sobriety court, drug courts, veteran courts are important, because I truly believe that there are certain crimes that we don't need to send people to jail right away. Certainly, I think that we should give people the opportunity to show that they have the heart or desire to change their lifestyle. In fact, in the prosecutor's office now, we have our own diversion program dealing with check cases and some driving offenses and retail frauds. And I want to continue that type of program. I want to build on it. I want to enhance it. And I want to make it better. Bottom line is that if people have the desire to change their life, if it's a substance abuse issue or if it's a theft issue, if they have that desire, they're going to change their life. But ultimately, if they don't, then I think the jailhouse door has to wait for them. But let's give them a chance to change their life first, and I'm ready to give them that opportunity.
We'll move on to the next question, and we'll be starting with Mr. Curtis.
Do you believe Muskegon County needs a new jail? Is there anything you specifically would like to see in a new jail?
I don't know how many people know that I'm actually the vice chairman of the Citizens Jail Review Committee for that. And that question's been asked me a lot. Do you think we need a new jail? And actually I do. But I'm not a build it and they will come type of person. The reason I believe that we need a new jail is that I have a lot of friends who work in that jail. I know a lot of people that go in and out of that jail. And the conditions that they are working in is one that no person should be working in, whether you're a county employee working in a jail or not. That jail needs to be improved, it needs to be made more efficient, but it doesn't need more beds. What needs to happen is that there needs to be the ability to have the programs in the jail. They have one library in the basement right now that runs all of their programs through there. That's it. And they have the scheduling conflicts. But the issue that I have is that county employees, sheriff's deputies are working in that jail in those conditions along with the inmates. And if the inmates need to be treated humanely, they will be. But if the benefit of a new jail is the fact that my friends and our county employees get to work in proper working conditions, then we're entitled to it.
That's okay. It's a great question. You know, I recently had an opportunity to talk to retired Sheriff Bob Carter, who's been heavily involved in the jail program since he was sheriff. And I tell you, this county has done half a dozen studies. They even had a lawsuit in 1997 spending thousands of dollars to develop plans for a new jail. Well, it's time to take the bull by the horns and actually get it done. And I'd be happy to be part of a team that actually got something done. The time for studies is over. It's now, if we're going to build a new facility, if we're going to improve the facility, then let's build a new or create a no-frills facility and let's get it done. The time for studies is over.
Mr. Hilson references this jail lawsuit that occurred in 1997. I was involved on behalf of the County Board of Commission, and my recall was that we were essentially in and out of litigation for upwards of a decade and a half. I followed that with involvement with the sheriff, the county board, in regard to the millage proposal that was put on the ballot in the early 2000s. It was turned down by the voters. What was, in fact, established was a minimum or a medium security facility in the basement of a jail at the cost of approximately $2 million, which was substantially less than the $35 to $50 million which it would cost to build a new jail. I, like Mr. Curtis, lament the working conditions experienced by the officers in the Muskegon County Jail. It is old, 50, 60 years old, but we can't afford it. I'm afraid we have to make do. No, I would not be supportive of taxpayers funding the $30 to $50 million in jail. Not at this time.
Any response to any of those comments?
The next question is for Mr. Wilson.
Okay. These next three questions will be related to each of you as candidates. Mr. Hilson, you are seen by some as the hand-picked replacement of Tony Tagg, who has been in office for 24 years. Do you represent a continuation of Mr. Tagg's administration, and how do you distinguish yourself in your office?
You know, it's amazing. I've had to answer this question over and over. Just so you know, my name is DJ Hilson. I am my own man. I will run that office the way that I want to run it. And this notion that Tony Tagg handpicked me is ridiculous. From day one, I wanted to be the prosecutor of this county. I made every effort on my own to make sure that happened. I was the one that started going out and outreaching to the community. I was the one that was sitting in the courtroom trying over 60 felony trials. That was me. That wasn't Mr. Tagg. And so this idea that somehow he's handpicked me because he wants to continue on is ridiculous. I will run the office the way that I want to run it. Now, certainly there are some policies that I appreciate. He's kept this community safe from violent criminals for a long, long time, and he's been pretty successful at it. And I'm going to continue those policies. But certainly, I view the office shifting in the direction it has to deal with our youth. And I'm really excited about the opportunity to encourage our youth and get them on the right track.
Thank you. By the way, why don't we do this a little differently, because we're dealing with a question for each candidate. Does anybody have any response? Okay. All right. This next question is for you, Mr. Curtis. You were fired from the prosecutor's office for violation of personnel rules about accepting gifts.
I like the word terminated, but that's fine.
You were terminated. What is the prosecutor's responsibility for maintaining the integrity of the office?
The responsibility of the prosecutor to maintain the integrity of the office is to make sure that nothing improper is taking place. As I've said before, Mr. Fung's family and I our families have been friends for over 6 years, golfing buddies for even longer, for that time period. Mr. Tagg himself did his investigation and found that there wasn't any improper activity between us. Even the state bar reviewed it and said that they haven't found any improper activity. To sit there and say that you can't be friends with somebody simply because of the position you're in isn't fair to the worker, isn't fair to the employees, and I think is much too controlling. If I want to be friends with an individual who happens to win the lottery and wants to take his friend somewhere, then I think you should be entitled to do that. I think what should happen is if there is a question raised, that that person takes the time to look into it and not make some rash decisions. But I believe the moral code and ethical code that I've lived by my entire life, you have to look at what the employee is doing, the facts and circumstances behind it, and not worry about how it reflects on yourself. I will stand behind my people if they are not making any mistakes. I won't just throw them out.
Any comments or any response?
Just a quick response from me.
Yes.
I don't disagree with the friends aspect. I think the big issue in regards to Mr. Curtis' termination from the office was the fact that he had an all-expense paid trip
Well, hold on.
to Vegas.
No. Well,
I mean, you know, he was given over $1,700 by a bail bondsman bonding company. And so I think that was the issue. It had nothing to do with the friendship. I think that was the issue, the appearance of that. And so I guess I want the public to understand that was the issue, not the friendship.
Would you like to respond?
yes, ma'am. Airfare and hotel. That was it. That was all it was. Dinner one night. We rented a limo from the hotel for all of us, myself and Ms. Norton, in appreciation for our friendship. It wasn't as if he came up and said, hey, I'm going to take you all to Vegas. It was a friendship-based activity. The issue that I have is we want to make a big deal about it being $1,700. That money, at our own suggestion, was repaid that day. Could have paid my own way then, and I did as soon as we got back.
Mr. Collins, are there any comments on this?
Okay, this next question, Mr. Corwin, is for you. You also are a former assistant prosecutor. Has your time away from the office changed your perspective at all about the approach and philosophy that is currently important?
Yeah, a quick little story. Back when I was a prosecutor, they used to call me Carbide because I was kind of like tough, maybe too tough. Looking back on it, I learned a lot. I learned a lot in regard to my representation of the county board, to the elected officials, in regard to a fiscal landscape that does not admit to building the biggest of jails in the world. I've seen that, I've grown to appreciate that basically crime, more than I felt before, is the product of joblessness and hopelessness. And that, looking back on it, very, very low percentage of people who are prosecuted are bad people. They're people who basically have lost their way. They have not had sufficient societal support. I have mellowed, I've become more liberal, I've become more compassionate, but I still would not tolerate murders, rapes, robberies, or child abuse. I still have no tolerance for that type of thing, but I'm more mellow.
Any comments? Okay,
Now we're back to questions that you'll all be answering. And we'll start.
Mr. Nelson, this one's for you first. You plan to be in the courtroom trying cases, or do you see the prosecutor's role as an administrator?
Well, it's a combination. Certainly the prosecutor is the administrator of the office. He's the overseer of the office. She's the overseer of the office. And there are functions in the office as the administrator that you have to take care of. It's also a position of being out in the community as well. So you have your community responsibilities. But as I told people who's asking this question, I'm a trial lawyer at heart. I've tried cases my entire career in this office. I'm not going to give that up just because I'm the prosecutor. I certainly will jump into the courtroom when I can, when I have the time, because that's what really gets my juices flowing. I enjoy it.
If I might. If memory serves, the last prosecutor, elected prosecutor to try cases was Gerald Warner. whom I served under back in the 1970s and 80s. I believe that the functions of the prosecutor, the elected prosecutor, are more day-to-day along the lines that Mr. Hilson has addressed. But in the last few months, because my colleague, Twa Reyna, had a baby, I've been getting back into court a lot more. And I'm enjoying it a lot more so. And I've been asked by the judges, would you try cases? Yeah, I think I would try some cases, but is it going to be my steady diet? No, there are some fine prosecutors in that office. Would I want to try some cases? Absolutely, because it's fun. It's challenging, but there are a lot of other duties. There's financial, there's leadership, there's administrative duties.
Mr. Curtis?
I learned when I was in the Army that you lead by example. You cannot expect to know what is going on with the individuals working in a courtroom, in district court, in circuit court, in family court, unless you yourself go down there every once in a while. To sit up in an office and then criticize people for what they do when you haven't been in those courtrooms yourself makes it difficult. I like district court. You get to see a lot of the officers, you get to interact with the citizens, but I also like trying cases in circuit court. But I'm not going to ask a single one of my employees to do something, a single one of these assistant prosecutors who deserve to know that their boss understands what they're doing by going in those courtrooms. You'll see. You'll see me trying cases in district court. I'll grab a file full of bench trials and walk down and give that assistant the time to catch up on their warrants in their office. Give them time to catch up on what's happening. Because if you demonstrate your leadership through what you're willing to ask them to do, then I won't be there all the time. They're absolutely right. There's a lot of administrative duties involved in that. But you have to show the commitment to the community by actually working as a prosecutor.
Any responses? Next question goes to Mr. Coleman.
Michigan has a relatively new concealed carry weapons law. And since the prosecutor does sit on the county gun board, how do you think that law is going to work?
Well, from afar, I really am not a big fan of the new CCW liberalization law. I go back again 20, 30 years ago where basically you had to show merit and need in order to carry a weapon. I am not a conservative. I do not support no helmet laws. I do not support laws that provide for everybody to be packing concealed weapons. I think that those are mistakes. I think, however, that I recognize that insofar as the CCW board is concerned, you have to follow the law as it is written. Would I advocate to the Prosecuting Attorneys Association to a more restrictive approach to the issuance of CCWs? Absolutely.
Mr. Curtis?
The county prosecutor has an interesting role on that board. The one thing that's interesting is the statute gives the prosecutor the ability to opt out of that board. Michigan is becoming a shall issue state. There isn't much discretion by that board anymore as to who does or does not get a weapon. However, I, serving in the military, defended the Constitution, which included the Second Amendment. I myself am a CPL holder, and I believe that every person's right to defend themselves. And if they wish to carry a weapon and they qualify, the state doesn't make much of a distinction that they're allowed to carry it. And that's what they should be entitled to do. I believe that we need to have that focus be on whether or not we want to do a shall issue or not, but we can't change that. That's the legislature determined that, and that's what you do. If it is saving money, then the prosecutor under that should opt out, because it is time consuming. The staff takes up has to do some of those records. And if you pull them out of that and leave it under the statute, then that discretion is gone.
Well, I mean, the law's the law. I'm all about following the laws that are written. I myself am a gun carrier, a licensed gun carrier, and I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in the people's right to bear arms. And quite honestly, when this law first passed, I think there was a potential scare that it was going to be the Wild West out there. People were going to be carrying guns and shooting at each other because they look cross at each other. And that hasn't been the case, because what's put in place is the part of getting your CCW license and the actual on-range training. And so people are educated about the dangers of carrying a weapon, and they're educated on the laws and what they can and can't do with a weapon. And so I think the legislature has taken caution into making sure that the folks that are getting their licenses are educated and trained. And as far as I'm concerned, if it's working, don't fix it.
This is another reader-submitted question. Is there a reasonable solution to the obviously massive drug problem in Muskegon County that you could implement? You see a way to stop the inflow of drugs, not just deal with the results of drug use in our county?
There was a time in this county when we used to deal with the influx. Now we don't. Now we worry about the low-hanging fruit that's out on the street corner that's selling the drugs. Those people need to be addressed, but they're not the ones who are bringing it into this community. And until we start to actively pursue those people again, we're not going to be able to stop that flow. WEMAT's job is to try to stop that flow of drugs from coming in. And if they're too busy trying to cop a dealer on the street, which we then can't turn into somebody that will allow them to go up the chain, then how are we going to be able to stop those people? We need to be more aggressive in that approach. And we need to give WEMAT the authority and the power and the people from the prosecutor's office to allow them to pursue those, not just the next day, not just 2 days later, but the moment that it's happening. That's how you get it. If we can run around and we can do street sweeps and we can arrest people all day long, but until we start trying to get those people that are higher up the chain, then nothing's going to change.
Having worked with the West Michigan Enforcement Team for pretty much my entire career, they're one team. And I think the real issue is that we have to expand that drug interdiction. If we want to attack the people that are bringing these substances into our community, that one team is not enough. And I think the other departments need the funds in order to be able to either fund their own teams or we can come up with one super drug team. Because quite honestly, those officers work tirelessly day in and day out, and they are a small number. Now, they work hard and they do a great job, but in order to stop the kind of problems that you're talking about, it's going to take more than that small team to do it. It's going to take a more cooperative or collaborative effort on all of law enforcement part in this community in order to have checkpoints or at least do interdictions on the highway. And until we get the money and the funds to do that, we're going to rely on this small team in order to do that.
Well, again, it's kind of back in my day type of thing. We worked very aggressively with not just the West Michigan Enforcement Team, but we had a couple of other teams, one by the Sheriff's Department, one by MPD, and we were much involved with the U.S. Attorney's Office in regard to absolutely interdicting. Our priority was the bigger dealers. Our priority was to take it up the ladder, not to go for the quick stats on how many guys you custody. Secondly, you've got to basically be qualitative in your judgment with regard to what drugs should be focused upon. Methamphetamines, cocaine, crack, heroin, things of that nature, those have got to be made the priority. The problem you've got with drug enforcement is that drug busts make everybody look good because you got big numbers. What you got to do is you got to go after the big guys. You got to go after the terribly harmful drugs. You've got to work regionally with other governmental agencies such as we used to do with the OPEC.
Can I respond for 1 second?
Yes.
When I was in the prosecutor's office, I was a supervisor of the prosecutors that were assigned to the drug team twice. The one thing I found was that it's easy to say there's only one drug team in Muskegon County. Well, there is. The problem is what you don't forget about is that cooperation level that extends beyond Muskegon County. The DEA, the ATF, the federal government. Anytime that we've asked for assistance from them, they came without a problem. And to say that to utilize only what we have here is putting ourselves on an island we don't have to be on. We have the ability to reach out and bring those resources here to Muskegon County, and that's what we're going to do.
I agree with you.
That's kind of what I said, so I'm fine.
All right, we're drawing towards the end of the debate here. So I think we'll move to our last two questions, which means that we will go to this one. And it goes to TJ.
All right, very simple question. What distinguishes you from your opponents?
A couple of things that distinguish me from my opponents. One, I'm the only candidate currently employed at the prosecutor's office. Secondly, I have the proven experience. As I indicated in my opening statement, I've tried over 60 felony trials. I have tried murder cases, I've tried armed robbery cases, I've tried rape cases, I've tried child molestation cases. I'm also extremely active in the community. I belong to, as I've indicated before, the community service organizations that are actually going out and doing good things in the community, like the Greater Muskegon KC, Rotary Club, the Fraternal Order of Police, the Knights of Columbus. I am the vice president of the local bar association. And so not only am I very strong in my convictions as far as the prosecutor's office is concerned, but I'm also very connected to the community and the people that live in this.
Two things, I'm a lot older. Presumably, all things being equal, wiser. Let's agree on that. Secondly, I've had the opportunity to work in a myriad of different functions, not just in criminal law, but in other areas of the law, and in dealing with, if you will, politics or statescraft or financial budgets, dealing with the county board of commission boards and the like, whereby I guess I've seen probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 times more than my opponents. I therefore offer more experience. I offer presumably more wisdom, but without taking anything away from the capabilities of either of my opponents, both of whom have been fine trial attorneys.
Life experience, the fact that I served in the military, the fact that I worked as a loss prevention officer, the fact that I worked in the prosecutor's office, and the fact that now I don't. I've got to see the outside looking in, and I found that there are some things that need to be changed. And to continue on with what we've been doing isn't going to do anything except keep the status quo as to right where it is. And we need to change that. The other is that my experience has taught me a lot of humility. I now know what some people feel when they're facing the prosecutor's office. And that's a scary thing, especially for people who have never been through the system before. That experience, along with the fact that trials are the very tip of the iceberg. You see the very tip, that's the fun, that's the flash, but you don't see everything else that goes into it. The work of the law enforcement officers, the work of the other assistant prosecutors, everything leading up to that point. I have done all of that leading up to that point, including going to the trial. And until we recognize that, we're still going to be here.
We're going to conclude the evening by offering you an opportunity to ask a question of one of your opponents. And we're starting with Mr. Coleman.
Do I have to pick? Mr. Hilson, I'm going to pick you.
Okay.
Because you got more business. God forbid, but we live in times of shrinking budgets, financial constraints. What would you do as elected prosecutor if you had to cut $150,000 out of the budget?
Well, that's a good question, Steve. And certainly what we are experiencing now and have experienced over the last several months is a county board saying, listen, we're going to collaborate, we're going to put departments together, and we're going to want you to shrink your budgets collectively. And we're dealing with doing more with less, essentially. I can tell you one thing, that I would do everything in my power not to lose or have to lay off an assistant prosecutor or clerical staff. Because those are jobs that those people would count on day in and day out. I would sacrifice equipment and anything else before I let an employee in my office go. And certainly, I think it would require some strategic thinking, some creative thinking, But, you know, we're doing that already, trying to work together with other departments in collectively shrinking budget. For that, ultimately, I would sacrifice anything else but a job.
Mr. Cole, you talked about you want to bring the prosecutor's office into the 21st century, that you want to take the office paperless. Well, if you didn't say it, that's all right. But how would you do that? How would you implement that? How long do you think it would take?
The paperless concept, you know, our office, my Cortland Law, we're primarily dealing with bankruptcy now, and that's called a paperless system, and yet we have files and files and files and files. That's not really my gig. I believe that was Mr. Hilson that made the point. I have made the point in my brochure that I would like to bring the prosecutor's office into the 21st century. How to do that? Basically by lots of the ideas that have been alluded to by you, Mr. Curtis, the drug court, the sobriety court, the veterans court, the specialty courts. Basically, we've got to find a way to do more with less. We've got to find a way to be more proactive. We've got to find a way where we're not statistically driven to see how many felonies we can prosecute and how many offenders we can send down the road to prison. Basically, what I see is it's not that I'm talking about lenience so much as I'm talking about basically smarter, better ways to save money so that we can harness and prioritize your use of resources.
Mr. Wilson, do you have a 30-second response to that? Do you want to respond to that as well?
Well, all I can say is that the office is already in that direction. In fact, the last 2 days, every assistant and every clerical staff, their towers were removed from their office, and everybody now has dual monitors, and everything is run through the phone. You all have new phones, and the computers now run through the phone. So we're one step closer to moving into a paperless system. The next step is to give us the devices that we can take to court, where we can actually get to our desktops from our portable, well, I'll call them iPods. So we are one step closer to a paperless system.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
The ability has been there for a long time. Twice, I tried to implement some way that law enforcement officers would be able to transmit their warrant requests and the paperwork directly to our office. Twice I was told, I like to feel paper. That's the old way of doing it. If we're going to save money, if we're going to save people's jobs, the technology is there. The people that are working there are young enough and know enough to be able to deal with it. And it's not that we're slowly moving, and that's what's happening. We're slowly moving. The technology is there. There's video phones. Officers can swear to warrants from their desk in the police departments.
All right. We conclude the evening with you, Mr. Wilson. Do you have a question?
I do. I'd ask a question, Mr. Curtis. What I've noticed is that your campaign is very vocal about how the office has violated your core principles that you saw things that you disagreed with. And my question is this: is that certainly if I felt that way, I would have left the office. Are those things that you are saying, is that as a result? I guess my question is, why didn't you leave if you felt that your principles were violated, or you felt that victims were being mistreated? Or is that just because you were terminated from the office?
Those have been my core principles my entire life. The other one I have is that if you want to try to change something, you change it from within. Throwing my hands up and quitting and walking out the door doesn't do any good to anybody. I have the ability in the position I was in to go in and try to make sure that I was protecting those people and protecting their rights. And to throw my hands up in the air and walk out the door and say, oh well, doesn't help anyone. Those are principles that I have tried to exercise my life by, tried to exercise my career as an MP, my career as an assistant prosecutor, and my career now as a defense attorney. Those are principles that need to be brought back. For too long did I see people say, well, that's the way it's supposed to be done, or that's the way we do it. I was vocal about those things. I worked with the courts in order to try to do that. Cobb's hearings. We might have a plea bargaining policy that says you can't plead this case, but when I'm in talking to the judge about a reasonable sentence, that's where I can help them. I've told several defense attorneys in this town, let's go in and do a Cobb's, because that's where I can exercise my control.
Any response? Well, that concludes our evening. I'd like to thank you all for coming, and I'd like to